It is a great pleasure actually for me to be back here in Pakistan. I've been attending the conference quite a number of times now, and I'm positively surprised how well it has been developing over the year, and also what kind of difference blue economic thinking can actually make. Just look at the conference exhibition and all the industry and the ideas that are actually being presented there. So I think this is quite remarkable, actually. Now, we are here in this conference to discuss the oceans and how the oceans can be better governed. This includes the blue economy, but as we've heard in the first session, it also includes a number of other questions and problems. And since my background is in maritime security, quite obviously there's also a link between the blue economy and maritime security, but this is not it. We also need to think about conservation, we need to think about climate change, and we need to think, perhaps most importantly, also about blue justice. Now, what I would like to do in the next 7 to 10 minutes or so is introduce you to some of the research on global ocean politics that we are currently carrying out. It is also research that you will find in our forthcoming book, which is called Understanding Maritime Security. And this you can hopefully buy the end of the year. And it's very much also work that is conducted as a collective project in a research group which is called the Ocean Governance Infrastructure Research Group. So we are looking at infrastructures in particular as a way to think about the oceans. So my key argument here is we need new ways of how to restructure and think about the oceans. Now, I think everyone here in the room would agree with the assessment that the oceans and the maritime space have received unprecedented global attention. Whether that's pirates, smugglers, interstate disputes, concerns over critical infrastructure protection, climate change, biodiversity loss, or environmental crime, global and national policymakers basically are busy now trying to protect the oceans. And I know this includes many people here in the audience. Yet there's something problematic about it. We have a lot of activities. Everyone is busy in trying to rescue the ocean in one way or the other. But often these activities are actually not in concert. They are fragmented, they are multidirectional, and often risk duplication or even contradiction between measures. How can we address that? What does that mean? And how can we organize the debate differently? And if I could have my slide now, that would be absolutely amazing. Now, I argued that the current discourse is basically structured in 4 new paradigms: maritime security, blue economy, ocean health, and blue justice. Now, in one way, these might be all familiar to you. They are novel in the sense that they go beyond old ways of thinking, such as sea power, freedom of navigation we heard about in the earlier session, marine safety, or post-colonial justice. So these are paradigms that develop this thinking further, but they, however, also decenter from the state. They take us away from the idea that the state should run everything and is the only important actor. Many times it is not navies that control the oceans, but it's actually the shipping industry that does. Very often the threats do not come from other states, but from pirates and from criminals or terrorist organizations. And these are exactly the things that the 4 blue paradigms highlight. However, while they are new, and share the emphasis on the non-state dimension, they are also radically different. If you look at the oceans from a maritime security perspective, it's all about blue crimes, it's all about terrorism, it's all about gray zone tactics and security threats. If you look at the oceans from the perspective of the blue economy, well, it's all about how to make money. It is about how to get people into jobs and how to make profit while keeping sustainability quite obviously in mind. If you look at the oceans from the perspective of ocean health, then the sea is basically a sick patient that requires science-based medicine such as restoration and recovery. And here, quite obviously, we are talking about climate change and biodiversity loss as the key challenges. But yet, very different problems come to the fore compared to maritime security and blue economy. Now, finally, the core issue at stake in blue justice is how to ensure that the revenues from the blue economy and the risks captured in maritime security actually are fairly distributed, both among societies, but also among coastal communities. And here the key problem are mechanisms of accountability and how to deal with problems such as corruption. Now the point here is, if we look at the oceans from these four new blue paradigms, we're not talking about one ocean anymore, we are talking about four different oceans. And at the same time, in each of the four blue paradigms, there are different actors engaged. Maritime security is about law enforcement, navies, and coast guards. Blue economy is about economic calculations, planning, and investment. Ocean health is about protection, conservation, environmentalism. Blue justice is mainly an activity that civil society groups and activists engage in. Here we are then not only talking about four different kinds of ocean problems, we are also talking about four different kinds of ocean communities, communities of professionals that are trying to address these problems. And here is the moment where things can often get very, very complicated. Consider the example of aquaculture. The blue economist would say, let's invest more into aquaculture because that can create profits, that can create jobs. Security advocates would agree, they would say, well, more jobs means less insecurity, so that's a good thing. But ocean health and justice professions would radically warn about the consequences for the marine environment and ask, where do the profits go? What are the impacts on the coastal communities? Take another example, marine spatial planning and marine protected areas. Both of these are core tools in the repertoire of blue economy and ocean health. But at the same time, if you work from a maritime security perspective, you clearly would warn that, well, it's not enough to have a protected area if there's no one out there that protects it. You need the law enforcement at sea, and at the same time, those arguing from a justice perspective would point out that in marine spatial planning, there's often a lack of equity consideration. Now, these are just two examples of many. And they show us that the four blue paradigms, these four different ways of thinking about the oceans, very often do not go together. So our key challenge here then today is to think about how to deal with that and how to go to a state where we can actually achieve synergy between security, economy, health, and justice concerns. Now, let me end on a quick note of what that might mean for navies. I think, first of all, for navies, this implies to recognize their role vis-à-vis all of these other actors, whether they're economic actors, civil society actors, or environmental actors. They need to learn more about the logics of these paradigms. But they also must learn how to collaborate better with these groups. Now, today, navies talk a lot about on how to cooperate with industry, the blue economy, but not necessarily enough how to build bridges with the marine conservation movement or those concerned about justice. And here we're in essence talking about building trust, making proposals that actually benefit everyone. Now, as we all know, one of the vital elements for building trust is maritime domain awareness. For the moment, we are only using maritime domain awareness as a tool for operations and interagency coordination, but I think it can become a much broader collaborative tool, in particular if we are merging security concerns with environmental concerns and start fusing the environmental data into the security data. Perhaps as a last point, navies, I think, must take the ocean health, the environmental debate much more serious. And this is largely triggered by climate change. On the one side, there's an operational question. Climate change will pose new challenges, such as new environmental regulations, will lead to new patterns of crime, but also to a wider spectrum of operations for navies, including enforcing these environmental regulations. But we are also talking about more oil spills, we are talking about more shipping accidents, more search and rescue, and potentially more roles in disaster relief. So it's really time to think about and make an honest assessment, and this does not only apply to the Pakistani Navy, but to all navies globally, whether they are actually fit for the job that climate change implies, whether they are actually fit to engage with these other communities, the blue economy community, the ocean health community, but also the blue justice community. To wrap it up here, I've introduced you to a problem I think that is important. There are 4 oceans, 4 kinds of communities that often do not work together in the way they're supposed to. There are untapped synergies there, and all of that points to a revised role for the Navy, or is at least an invitation to think about these matters much more systematically and much more strategically than has been done before. I thank you for your attention and very much look forward to the questions and also the discussions in the tea break and so on. Thank you very much.